Hi, welcome to Life in a Bottle, Season 2, Episode 49. I can't believe we're almost at 50 episodes, but here we are. We are mixing it up a little bit from some of the wines that we've brought to you lately. We try to kind of alternate Old World and New World and white and red was on deck this week, and I thought, it'd been a minute since we'd visited something from this part of the world. So, where are we to start out? We're in Italy. We are in central Italy in Tuscany. And more specifically, we are in the village of Monteleccio. This is the 2016 Sesti Monteleccio Toscana Sangiovese. So I threw a lot of words at you there. Sesti is the name of the gentleman who makes the wine. He does it at his estate, which we'll get into in just a moment. Castello di Argiano. Again, being a 2016, this bottle has a couple of years on it, but it's come together really nicely. And I'm excited to get into the glass, but I'm going to try and hold off. Giugi Sesti started his adult career, his adult life, as an astronomer. He's written several books on the subject. In the 70s, he decided they wanted to move to Tuscany, he and his family, and they found this estate, the Castello di Argiano, in Monteleccio that was pretty dilapidated and abandoned. It was ruins, basically. And he decided that he wanted to breathe new life into this estate. So he spent some time bringing it back to life. And if you look at some pictures, I'll include some in the email, but if you go to their website or Kermit Lynch's website, there are some absolutely gorgeous pictures. The estate is stunningly beautiful. As I mentioned, it is in Monteleccio. So Brunello di Monteleccio is kind of what people think of when you hear that. And this is not that, but they make that. They make Brunello. And this is almost that. I hear people throw around the phrase baby Brunello to describe Rosso di Montalcinos and Sangioveses from Tuscany. And I think this kind of fits into that category, but I hate to kind of lump it in there. Sesti, the family, has been making wine. They planted grapes in the early 90s, and they've been making wine since. By the late 90s, his daughter Elisa had kind of helped him take the reins, and they kind of share responsibility for both the vineyards and the winery, and they're making some absolutely killer wine. As I mentioned, they do make some Brunello, they make some Sangiovese Rosé as well, and they make this, which is their Toscana. So, to speak briefly about Toscana, it's an IGT appellation. Everybody's familiar with seeing DOC or DOCG on a label. And IGT is, in a lot of people's heads, a lesser appellation or a lesser grade, but it's not necessarily the case. It really just means that the wine doesn't meet the strict geographic or particular requirements for one of those appellations. So to say that this is just an IGT wine would be selling it far short of what it really is. It's something really beautiful. They're making perfect Sangiovese. We'll get into the glass in a second here. But basically, from the very beginning in the 90s, they set out to make wine pretty naturally. They didn't want to mess around with it. They didn't want to use any chemicals or fertilizers in the vineyard. They wanted it to be part of the ecosystem of the estate on this beautiful grounds that they had brought back to life. So he hasn't embraced, or they haven't embraced, any particular certifications, because, to quote them, they feel like none of the current certifications that are available are up to their standards. Again, they're not using any chemicals in the vineyard, they're not doing any funny business in the winery, they're taking grapes, they're harvesting them, they're making wine, and that's the end of it. As far as the grapes go, I should say, again, we're talking Sangiovese, 100% in this cuvee. 15-year-old vines, and the soils that they're grown in are oceanic sedimentary soils. So there are going to be some good calcium deposits and things like that we talk about in other regions, but there's so much complexity and so many different layers to this soil that, again, to kind of just say that it's calcareous is selling it a little bit short. They're vinifying the wine in stainless steel, and then they're aging the wine for a year before they bottle it in huge oak barrels. And when I say huge, I mean 800-gallon neutral oak botti. Neutral oak, so it's used to the point where it's not imparting any oak influence, but it is allowing a little bit of micro-oxidation. So oxygen can breathe through the wood to a very small degree, and it does a couple things. A, it rounds off the edges from the tannins, which in young Sangiovese can be a little bit stiff. B, it adds beautiful texture and complexity on the palate. And C, it helps almost inoculate against rapid oxidation in the bottle. So between the tannin and the micro-oxidation that this gets in oak, I think you could hang on to this for probably 5 to 10 years. So to get into the glass, it's beautiful Sangiovese. And this is like perfect for this time of year. You get some of that crisp autumnal dried leaf earthiness to it, that rich, just dry garden soil. But that's only on the heels of that tart, ripe, lush black cherry. And we'll get to the palate in a second, but there's a lot going on the nose. There's some floral elements. It's almost like that violet that you can get from Syrah sometimes. And that earthiness is more complex than I'm finding the words for at the moment. There's some leatheriness. It's absolutely beautiful. All right, on the palate, it's tarter, much more tart than the nose suggests. The nose kind of suggests the fruit is going to be super ripe and lush. I mean, drooling here. But there's great acidity. There's great layers and structure to this because you have that fresh acidity right out of the gate. Then you have that beautiful texture, that lushness that fills your mouth. A little bit from the barrel, a little bit from that micro-oxidation, and a little bit from just the fact that it's a little bit bigger wine. This comes in at 14% alcohol. After that, the tannins kind of take over and ride that right throughout the rest of the palate. And the tannins, again, are there. They're definitely present, and they let you know it. But it's not astringent or sharp in any way. It's very smooth, not quite velvety, kind of in between what I would say like leathery and velvety. So there's some there for sure, but it's not, I don't feel like my lips are stuck to my teeth. As far as pairings go, you can pair this with a lot of things. I think anything that you would pair Chianti or Rosso di Montalcino with, you could definitely pair with this. You could go red sauce, you could go meatballs, something along those lines. I personally would lean towards pairing this with a steak. I think the bistecca alla Fiorentina kind of style porterhouse would be killer with this. I think as the weather's cooling off a little bit, this would be perfect with a stew or a roast, as long as you're not using too much spice. I think this would be beautiful with that. But at the same time, this would be killer with some herbed root vegetables, some roasted up, some eggplant even, some mushrooms. You could really do a lot with this. And wine like this is super flexible because it has that structure and it's kind of broken down into those different segments. So it kind of can lean many different directions as you're pairing. That's beautiful. I'm super excited to present this as an autumnal offering. So cheers, guys. I hope you enjoy.